وأكثر عزما وإصرارا على مواصلة طريق الهجرة والجهاد.
These are the leaders of the group behind the failed Christmas Day bombing of an airliner over Detroit. They announced themselves to the world a year ago as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and claimed to have trained Umar Abdul Muttalib, the young Nigerian charged with a deadly attack. And it's not its first act of terror. Its members have been linked to the bombing of the American embassy in Yemen, in which the attackers killed 10 people. Two of these men are former Guantanamo detainees. The video was released the day after President Obama announced his intention to close the camp. They were among the 14 detainees on the penultimate flight from Guantanamo. They were known as Batch 10. This is the astonishing video of their flight home. In all, 120 Saudi detainees have been released. 10 have since fled to Yemen, most to join Al-Qaeda. Half of those who absconded were on this one flight. Our investigation has followed the extraordinary stories of the 14 men from Batch 10 2 years after their return. Saudi Arabia hoped that they will become good citizens once they'd been through its controversial rehabilitation program. But the fact that 5 of them did run us to Yemen illustrates the danger and the difficulty the world faces in dealing with some Guantanamo detainees. In the course of compiling this report, I managed to gain exclusive access to one of the founder members of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. This is Mohammed Al-Awfi, Guantanamo prisoner number 333, so-called field commander.
Allah, we ask from you to provide us with a banner of jihad in the Arabian Peninsula.
Al-Awfi has had a remarkable journey. He's now back in Saudi Arabia in prison, albeit in luxury 4-star accommodation. He told me he joined Al-Qaeda in Yemen because of what he suffered at the hands of the Americans. He alleges the torture began at Bagram Air Base, Afghanistan, in the wake of 9/11.
They'd open a hole in the chair and then pull out your testicles from underneath and then hit them with a metal rod.
How were you treated at Guantanamo?
Treatment in Guantanamo was extremely brutal. I found that the psychological abuse was worse than the physical torture. Both were prevalent at Guantanamo.
Al-Awfi was clearly in pain as he boarded the flight home. He said it was the result of the injuries he'd received at Bagram. Also on board was another founder member of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, its so-called Secretary General, Saud al-Shiri, Guantanamo prisoner number 372.
Our imprisonment has only increased our adherence to our principles. Allah has blessed us with migration to the land of sport and jihad, the land of Yemen and faith.
A third member of Batch 10 was Khalid Said al-Bawadi, Guantanamo prisoner number 68. He too alleges he'd been tortured during interrogation by the Americans in Kandahar. He couldn't believe the reception he received on the flight home.
They gave us food and a drink, anything we wanted or needed, to the point that they just told us, sit down and relax, and we will give you anything you want.
On touchdown in Riyadh, the former detainees were welcomed by Sheikh Jalani, an imam who advises the government on Guantanamo and returning jihadis.
We considered them victims, so we treated them humanly.
And this is where the returnees are headed, to the Prince Mohammed bin Nayef Care Center just outside Riyadh, one of the main reasons why Saudi Arabia is prepared to take them back. The government believes it's possible over time to de-radicalize and rehabilitate former jihadis by challenging and deconstructing Al-Qaeda's ideology. Although it's officially called a care center, it's still a prison. In reality, it's more like a holiday camp. Over 100 Guantanamo prisoners have now been through the rehab program, and the government claims an overall 90% success rate. Khalid al-Bawadi is one of its so-called beneficiaries, now back home with his family, and a job facilitated by the government. His jihadi days are over.
It helped us clear out all the remaining effects of the Guantanamo prison, and really you were transformed mentally and physically, with all the doctors radically transformed.
Not every former Guantanamo detainee chooses home comforts like Khalid. More painful emotions swayed Al-Awfi.
There was a lot of hatred and bitterness against the Americans. Because of the way I had been treated, I couldn't forget it. I was in rehabilitation for a brief time, but the 7 years I spent in Guantanamo had a powerful effect on my mental state.
After the program, Al-Awfi and fellow passenger Al-Shiri fled into Yemen, becoming founder members of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Al-Awfi's video suggests the damage the rehab program may be doing to Al-Qaeda.
We warn our imprisoned brothers to avoid the attention and advice program which is administered by the ignorant oppressor Mohammed bin Nayef and his criminal helpers.
Now secure in Saudi hands after giving himself up, Al-Awfi is being drained of every last scrap of intelligence about Al-Qaeda. He told me how he allegedly came to appear in the video.
I was against the idea of being on a video, but the Al-Qaeda leadership put pressure on me to appear. They ordered me to appear on the video.
Further indication of the damage that the Saudi rehab program may be inflicting on Al-Qaeda is the fact that a suicide bomber tried to assassinate its eponymous founder, Prince Mohammed bin Nayef, the Deputy Interior Minister. The bomber evaded tight security by concealing the device up his rectum. The bomber died. The prince survived. Another returning prisoner in Batch 10, another Al-Shiri, this time Youssef, crossed the border last October in a bombing mission against Saudi Arabia. He was killed in a shootout with Saudi security forces. His namesake and fellow passenger, Saud al-Shiri, remains at large, now believed to be second in command of Al-Qaeda in Yemen. To the Saudis, he's a salutary reminder that their rehabilitation program isn't a magic bullet. And to President Obama, he's a fearful warning that not all Guantanamo detainees are going home to settle down. 2 others from Batch 10 are still at large. And what of Mohammed Al-Awfi? He says he now feels quite differently.
I saw the truth, and I saw that the path was a deviant one, away from the Sunnah. I became misguided. Then I realized that this path was the wrong path. Thanks to God Almighty, I realized that, and I made a final decision to return to Saudi Arabia.
Are you a different person now?
No doubt. I'm a new person. I have now realized that I had a warped ideology, although it had a sound basis.
But as the numbers from Batch 10 show, with 5 of the 14 returnees ending up in Yemen, Al-Qaeda's ideology has proved resilient.